Now we're going to move on to our panel discussion, which is Bridging Brain and Body, Frailty, Mental Health, and Cognitive Enhancement for Longevity. So we're going to have Dr. Jana Holroyd-Leduc up here as well, Dr. Laura Hamley, Lovin, please, Dr. Rose Judy. But I also will be introducing Harjeet Kaur, and I would ask her to come on stage as well. Harjeet Kaur, she will share her story as well, but I want to say that she's a mental health advocate. Her work focuses on promoting mental well-being amongst diverse populations. And the Honorable Leela Ahir will be moderating this talk.
Okay, I feel like the luckiest girl in the world. I get to sit with these rock star women up here and to be able to talk about these important issues. Thank you so much for the presentations and for being here today to talk about this. There was a lot of information that was covered, so we'll sort of jump right in, and we're going to have some time for questions at the end as well too, so I'm looking very forward to this. I'm actually going to start because we were just talking about frailty, Dr. Jana. So if you're looking at, because you'd mentioned this, but maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into cognitive decline, because it's often intertwined, isn't it, with the frailty piece. So you were talking about some of the combinations of things that you see as potential in managing that. Could you, because we didn't have a lot of time to get into that, could you talk a little bit more about addressing like the mind-body connection for aging and populations? We'd like to hear a little bit more about that from you.
So definitely there is a sort of cognitive frailty or component to, and we know that people that are living with dementia, so by definition, if you have moderate dementia, you're living with moderate frailty, right? There's a relationship. Dementia is more than just the impact on sort of what people think of in terms of their memory. It also impacts your mental health and it impacts your function. So what do we know about dementia and about cognitive health? So the same things that are good for our heart and good for the rest of our body are also good for our brain. So we do know when we look at the evidence that staying physically active, following those healthy lifestyles, right? So we know that if you don't smoke and you watch alcohol, all those things that we're doing that also, protects our, like I said, our heart and the rest of our body is actually going to protect our brain. And that's probably the most evidence around sort of how do you successfully age and what's the relationship between frailty and cognition. So very closely related. And so we need to move. We need to be physically active and stay also, cognitively active. There's some evidence that, right, staying engaged in definitely social interactions are important, right? People that are isolated tend to be at higher risks. We don't quite understand, though, the relationship. There's been a lot of sort of sold technologies around if you do these online things and these online games and stuff like that, you'll have successful cognitive aging. I don't think there's evidence so much for that, but that being said, it doesn't hurt to do your Sudoku puzzles or do the things you like, read, do the things that, right, stay cognitively active, but do it in a way that you also find value, decreases your stress, address, so you aren't lonely, you aren't, all those sort of healthy things that's been talked about today really will help you successfully cognitively age. Factoring in that there's genetics and there's other environmental components, there's only so much you can do as an individual.
Right. My father actually has diabetes. He's 85, just turning 5, and he had his toes amputated through neuropathy, and getting him to be able to walk and move around is probably one of the hard, if he was here, I'm sorry, Dad, you're not here to defend yourself, but the hardest part is that not being able to connect with the floor sometimes actually, and being able to walk. So this is actually, it's obvious, but I think needs to be pointed out, and very, very grateful for this discussion. I don't know, this is the first time I've ever had a conversation about frailty, and I was really, really interested. I think all of us can take a lot of information from this and apply it to the work. So Dr. Laura, I'm going to move on to you. So I have a couple of questions for you based on sort of your talk, but also some other things of interest. So one of the things is, I'd love to have a small discussion with you on the impact of chronic stress. You had talked a lot about burnout, obviously, but chronic stress on cognitive health and mental health practices. And you had sort of started mentioning about how longevity plays a part in that, but also to that, you had talked about workplace culture and that as well too. And then also the mental health and the benefit of working longer. There were 3 main themes there that we sort of talked about that I think are very related. Would you mind taking us through a little bit more of that, and I can repeat part of the question.
Sure, those were three
I
or
know,
four
I know.
questions,
It's big.
Mila.
I was taking lots of notes. I don't know about you. I thought it was, and she's a wonderful speaker. I've heard Dr. Laura for years. We've known each other for a long time, so it was great. So please, if you can connect the dots.
Yeah, we have. So I think that with work and the concept of work, there was this real, you work until you retire and then you don't work anymore. And that was the way it was.
I'm not retiring, ever.
You're not retiring ever. I know, neither am I. But I think what we see happening with that is if someone doesn't have purpose, meaning, and fulfillment, and they suddenly retire, and they're a high achiever, like a lot of you, and work has been a big part of their identity, it's actually really harmful psychologically. And I would argue it's harmful physically. And that's why you hear of some people abruptly retiring and then they become depressed, or they end up getting a physical health issue suddenly and they can't enjoy their retirement. And I find that that's way too abrupt. And for a lot of us, the 3 Gs aren't enough: golf, gardening, and grandkids. They're important to some of us for sure. And probably me included. I love golf and I'll love my grandkids one day, and gardening's not bad. But I think we need more meaning and purpose and being able to contribute to society in that last third of our career and make a difference. And again, I think that's really important. And being able to be mentally healthy and physically healthy allows us to do that.
Well, I'm 2-0. I can kind of do the third G, but the golfing and gardening, I'm hoops. I can sort of grow plants inside. I tried raspberries this year, didn't work well. So, no, that's great. Thank you so much. And then I'm going to move on to Harjeet just for a minute. So I don't know if many of you have met Harjeet. She speaks all over the place. Her story is inspiring to say the least. But you do a lot of work. You have so much commitment on community and social services and the perspectives on that and the support systems, and helping adults maintain their physical and cognitive health. We'd really love to hear a little bit more with respect to that. And you've heard a lot today, with also respect to your personal experience.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for having me over here, because I haven't seen any cancer patient out there till now. And I'm a stage 4 rare blood cancer survivor, and also I'm patient advocate. For me, all those things do matter a lot, because I come from a background where there's a huge stigma around cancer, and we don't talk about all of those things. Mental health support, we are in our families, we don't even talk about cancer. So when I came to this country, I was just an immigrant, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 after 3 months. So it took them 3 months to actually diagnose my stage 4 cancer. So one of those things is if we have early diagnosis, then I could have prevented my menopause, and also, could have actually not had the long-term side effects of the treatment. So we really need to, work upon holistic care approach, also about, timely diagnosis, and also patient navigation support. We need more patient voices out there so that we can help and, improve the better system in Canada, because we really need those voices to be heard so that we can raise more awareness about all these services. And sorry, because I don't see, I see a lot of sports groups out here, but very, very few support groups are there who actually talk about mental health support system, physical support systems, right? When I was going through my treatment, there was time, because I had my stem cell transplant during COVID, so I was completely bedridden. I was not having any kind of support system that time. I had a family, I had my husband, I had my brother, but because being a South Asian, we never talked about what I was going through mentally. So, and being a young adult too, a lot of people see that, okay, young adult, probably they might not go through cancer, but right now we have more cases of young adults who are healthy, right? I never had any health issues earlier in my life until 30, and I was diagnosed at the age of 32, right? People over here are talking about nutrition, yoga, meditation, and the diet. I did everything, but I still don't know the answer of why I got this. So, and now seeing all those things since morning, listening to all those things which are happening around the globe, the testings, the genomic testings, and AI is doing so many things. I'm hoping for a better future for the patients.
And especially with your ability to bring the conversations and to reduce the stigma. Half of the battle, as most of us know, in mental health and in any sort of situations when it comes to our healthcare, it's very difficult to have these conversations. We can have a lot of medical discussions, but coming down to that real conversation and talking about it. So with that in mind, Dr. Rose, would you mind speaking a little bit about resilience and about folks in this area and what you're seeing? Because you were talking earlier, I thought it was really interesting. One of the really large impacts that I got from your speech today is she was talking about speaking to 18 to 20-year-olds about what they're going to look like when they're 80. I'm 54 and I'm still having a hard time imagining when I'm 80. So I would really love, I know, just to build on what Harji was saying, can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and building that resilience and that conversation that we need to have and reducing the stigma, and then also about, we were going to talk about frailty and other things and mitigating that in old age, but I think part of that is this discussion that you were talking about.
Absolutely. I say a lot of things, so I'm glad that
that one was really interesting.
And I do appreciate your story, and definitely the conversation here that I've been hearing from my colleagues and people here on the panel as well is the stigma associated with talking about some of the sensitive topics, such as actually dementia as a stigmatized topic. When we're talking to ethnocultural communities who come from backgrounds where family piety, I guess, or filial piety is very important. Family dynamics are very important, and keeping things within the family is very important, so people don't, talk, let's say, about what's happening in some of our families. So mental health in particular is quite stigmatized. Even when we're addressing the topic of mental health, when I do approach ethnocultural communities, I actually tell them that I'm talking to them about health and well-being from that holistic perspective. I don't really say that I'm addressing mental health or mental illness. And you find that every community, our society as a whole, I think we are all resilient. This concept of resilience has really come out during COVID. Resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something that is acquired, learned. And I don't necessarily personally like the idea or the definition of resilience as being the ability to bounce back, and some of you may have heard of that definition, because you don't really bounce back from an experience. You're not the same when you go through an experience. Resilient people go through particular experiences in their life journey that does have an impact on their human development, whether physically or mentally, their emotional development, and how they see the world. They will see the world in a different lens. So to your question about how do you develop resilience, it's really just to live life. I had actually a group of older adults come visit my class yesterday, and some of them actually did say that the students asked them a question, and they said, what is it that you would have liked to tell your younger future self that now you have in the 80s? I had residents who came in the 80s and 90s.
The reverse question.
Yes.
Okay.
And so many of these older adults actually said, we wish we were more adventurous and we weren't held back by our fear of living life. And that is something that my students really appreciated. And you build resilience by living life.
This is actually one of the discussions we have about the wisdom of those who've lived a little bit more life and the impact that it has on these younger generations. And I bring it back to you, Dr. Jaina. You're talking about the physical attributes of frailty and all of that, but you did mention in your speaking notes about that mental health piece of it. And can you dive into a little bit more about that and what your findings have been around like the human side of frailty and some things that maybe we can all, because we all have people that are in this age group or even people who are younger that may be suffering from conditions that may be preventing them from getting beyond fear and actually living their lives, if you wouldn't mind jumping into that.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what you talked about resiliency, there was a study a few years ago that looked at people that had lived to be 100, and it looked at why did they live successfully to be 100, and it was interesting what a lot of those people had lived, had horrible things happen to them, like they had a parent die when they were a child, or they'd had a horrible trauma. They hadn't lived sort of perfect lives and follow necessarily the perfect, diet and the perfect activity. But the one thing that they all had was that they had the ability, the resiliency to actually continue on and to, it changed them, but they continued on and they got on with, like you said, they lived their lives, right? So that I thought was really interesting and telling, right? So we like as humans to think we have all this control, right? If I do, and to your point, right, you did all these things, right? And which is also why we have to be careful, because people can really live healthy lives and do everything that's right. And, and if we're not careful and when we say, it's all on you to not get frail and to not, have mental health or to have health issues. And if you do, then you didn't do something right. That's actually a very naive approach, because our genes and our environment, all of those who live in Calgary, we don't know what all this exposure to forest fire smoke every summer is going to do to us and our children, right? So we all, we have to realize as humans, we only can control so much. And so my approach would be, yes, we should try everything we can to, stay active, stay engaged, find joy, right, in your life, and to do all those things. But terrible things are going to happen to all of us. People are going to get diseases. Like you said, your dad, right, has diabetes, lost his toe, it limits him, right? And we just have to, keep trying to do what we can and just keep living, right? And so I think that that's actually a really good message, and to be kinder to each other, and to not people are going to need healthcare. People are going to need to be treated by disease, and to say, we need to shut down hospitals and we shouldn't be treating diseases. It should be all about successful aging. That's a bit naive. I think we need both, right? And we need to be understanding, and so when people and destigmatize.
Yes.
So right. So mental health is just like any other component of health. It's not a weakness. It is the way it is. So I have 2 children that are living with learning disabilities, for example, right? And I teach them. They just learn differently. They're neurodivergent, and they're going to have great and active lives, and that, right? And it is not something to label as a stigma, right? But my husband's family, who grew up in rural Alberta, struggle with that because they see it as a weakness, right? Yeah. So you have to. So I think it's all on us to say, right? We're all going to have crappy things, and things are going to happen, and it's okay. We need to have understanding and empathy and be there for each other, because that's actually going to be, to your point, right? I think, right? Get rid of this toxicity and actually start looking after each other.
Dr. Laura, did you want to chime in on this discussion?
I loved everything you had to say. Mental health should be like dental health. You take care of it on a daily basis. And I think we should talk openly about mental health and about our own struggles and struggles in our family. I grew up Calgary, 1970s. Mental health was not talked about. My mother was mentally unwell, and it was shoved under the carpet. And I'm so glad that these days we can start to talk about these topics. And workplaces need to create healthy cultures where people can thrive. That's their job. And I think being focused on quarter by quarter earnings and profits, and that's the main metric of success, I think is really short-sighted, and it's not sustainable. So I'm seeing a lot of, toxic is an extreme word, but it's true. It's causing health problems to people. But it's also up to us as humans to take care of our mental health like we do our dental health.
Well, and it impacts our longevity. I mean, that's why we're all here, is to look at not just lifespan, but health span, yes, to your point. And so if we're looking at that, you were talking a little bit earlier about sleep and relaxation. I'm like the worst sleeper on the face of the earth. And I think that, I have a very joyful, blessed life. But I'm always thinking, my brain is always going forward. So the sleep part for me is definitely an issue, but I don't, it's not something I'm cognizant of it, but I don't think it impacts me in a negative way, at least not at this point. I'm sure there would be many. That's why I'm bringing up who here has issues with sleeping. Anybody else? Yeah, if you're willing to admit it. But we're not allowed to brag about our 16-hour days, Dr. Baker, or 60-hour weeks, right? But I was going to say if we could talk. It was a great point, though. I'm like, we're always talking about, how much did you work today? Oh, yeah,
60.
Yeah. So in respect to health span and longevity, let's talk a little bit about the sleep part. It's another stigma, and we pat ourselves on the back for staying up later and longer and working harder. And like you were saying, how do we apply some of what you're talking about to help ourselves within this space. I mean, there's lots of things we can do in the science space, but let's talk about this from where you were coming from with regards to sleep and relaxation, and you were talking about withdrawing socially and some other things like that.
I view taking care of your health as being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and social. So 5 different elements, and what are you doing in all of those different elements? And I think that sleep is a really important physical element. I'm not a sleep expert, I'm not a sleep doctor, but I would say that too often we're binge watching Netflix in the
Never
evenings.
do that.
I know some of you are guilty. But I think that we need to get proper sleep hygiene and get off of our cell phones, get off of our devices well before we go to bed. And there's so much research on this, but yeah, I'm going to defer it.
Okay, well, we'd love to take some questions from the audience at this point in time. If there's any, we have some amazing experts up here, so if you have any questions at all for us, we would love to hear from you. If not, I have some questions. You guys covered all your bases, really. Okay, well, I'm going to, we had talked a little bit about, so Dr. Jaina, would you mind, can you talk a little bit about personalized care within frailty? You started to cover that a little bit. Would you mind diving into that a little bit more? This is a really important part of what you were talking about.
Yeah, so I think there's going to probably be a role for precision medicine, and when we start looking at frailty, like I said, there's some early evidence that there could, there's probably a relationship between the microbiome and your risk of frailty, just like for other diseases. I think though it's early days, so I think we still need more research. We need more studies to actually determine, what is that relationship, and what do you, how are you going to target? So I think, and how does, from a jail science, how does your microbiome and your environment and your health behaviors and all your biology of aging risk factors, how does that all go together and to, sort of help you as an individual, to have an optimal life, right? With where you're living as independently and as active as possible. So I actually think we haven't studied it enough. I think we're just starting to realize that it's going to be important. So, which I think is really exciting, because there's not been a lot of science, right? Like you said, the fact that most people probably don't even know about frailty, and I can tell you, most of my physician colleagues don't really understand frailty, even though it's actually a big driver of healthcare utilization, and it's a bigger driver of sort of how someone's going to successfully age than anything. We should be looking at it more. So I think it's an exciting area that's developing, and we need to be investing in it. We need to be doing more in it, and then the precision health and the individual strategies will come. In the meantime, like I'm aging like the rest of you, so what you can still do though those individual things. So paying attention to your own body, getting sleep, very important. Actually, sleep and dementia is also important. And I'm a good sleeper, so yay, I'm doing one thing good because it comes naturally.
What about the golf and the gardening?
I don't golf. I try to garden, but my daughter's better.
Yeah.
I'm like you, I can,
Grow raspberries.
an indoor plant can maybe stay, anyways. So I think in the meantime, though, we can do the things that there is evidence for. So staying active and being, and trying not to, paying attention to your mental health. Doing all those things without the precision part, but the precision part will come. Yeah. And I think that's exciting. It's an exciting area to be going. And maybe with the shifting in our population, people will start investing more time and effort and resources into actually understanding that.
And Harjeet, as you went through your process, I mean, like I said, I've heard you speak a few times. You were saying just briefly about how you wish you had known more, or that those things had, can you tell us a little bit more? Because you've had a chance to sort of delve into your own healthcare and the things that went really well, but also where we're lacking. Can you talk a little bit about that and where you see precision healthcare going, especially with respect to cancer?
I think me and my husband, when we moved here, we were advocating for ourselves before the diagnosis, because it took them 3 months to just diagnose my symptom. And it's weird because the only symptom I had was high fever, which is very common, right? And I had fevers for 3 months, and I had all the scans, all the tests, a couple of surgeries, biopsies, but we had no answers. But in my gut, I had this feeling that something is not right. and we had to do something about it. But that's back in 2019, right? Because when we didn't have so many options for us. And so it took a lot of courage for us to go out and navigate our own healthcare system as being an immigrant. It was challenging for us in the beginning, but when I was going through the treatment, I felt that, okay, I'm like a full-time job where I'm going through my chemo, where I'm going through my surgeries and stuff like that. But once I was done, I felt that I need to do something about it. And that's how, the work of advocacy started, where I wanted to support and get help out there too, right? But when I joined a couple of organizations, Canadian Cancer Society and LLSC, I couldn't find anyone with my own color in those groups. That's how, this thing started, that I really wanted to talk about more in our South Asian community, because we have so many South Asians in Canada, but we don't have any support groups for them, because there are language issues, there are so many issues where we don't talk about cancer. So how will you deal with those things, right? Which led to mental health too, right?
Or addiction.
Yeah, right? So,
Absolutely.
and it was scary for me, because I had a support system, but we never had an open conversation. And that was killing me inside, that we never talked about my experience or their experience. So that's how it all started. And now where I am, I'm happy, that cancer gave me this opportunity where I am actually talking openly about it within my community, across, Canada, just to make sure that people are aware that how important is it to raise awareness and bring patient voices. And to everyone, you have to be your own health advocate when it comes to any medical issues.
Dr. Judy, would you like to chime in on this conversation? You have a lot of expertise in this background.
I really appreciate and I'm grateful to hear these conversations, really, but definitely I absolutely 101% agree with you. I think having those open conversations are very important. I really believe in community engagement, community advocacy strongly. Working with communities who are usually vulnerable and do not speak English as a main language. I work also with a lot of communities who are illiterate or low literacy as well. And so even being able to read pamphlets or flyers or information in their own language is very difficult. But having these oral conversations and spreading this knowledge and education is very important, because it does break the barrier between what is out there and available for people to feel supported and advocated for, versus them feeling isolated from mainstream societies. And a lot of our communities definitely are very hungry for knowledge and awareness. They're just struggling with knowing where to get it and whether or not they're culturally appropriate and respectful of their backgrounds. And I think we need to also work on ensuring that cultural humility and competency are also at the forefront of anything that we develop.
Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause to our wonderful panelists? Thank you so much for having us. And I'll just finish by saying this room is full of many people. You're very powerful in your own spaces. This movement doesn't happen without your voices at the table and with these consultations and with cultural competencies. So thank you so much for being here. And hopefully we'll be able to spread the word of what is necessary in order to change our healthcare. Thank you so much.
If I can ask the panel to stay, and you know what, I think you all deserve a little bit of a bar break, so Alina's going to get up here and help you with a bar break. And